Malolelei, tēnā koutou e tēnei e te tupuhi o Aotearoa, mihi atu mo tēnei hui, mihi atu mo te wiki o te reo Māori. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you in this wonderful forum. It's a pity that we can't meet in person, but that is the nature of our lives these days. I'm so glad to be given the opportunity to speak. I thought I knew the topic I was given because I only found out yesterday when I looked at preparing this that is quite a big topic. But I have spoken before in a number of occasions where I claim that there are two groups of people that I admire the most in the way we live. The first ones are the first one are the nurses, and the other ones the teachers. And unfortunately, those two groups of people are not highly valued in our society, but I think they play very, very key roles. I started at Messi in this role the beginning of last year, and I'm still trying to find my position at the university. So some of the things I am going to share with you are predominantly where I see now on things. I started last year when I came into Messi. I noticed that we never had a Pacific Islander being given honorary doctor at Messi. And so I started to do my research, and I found this particular nurse and put him forward, and it's been approved by the council recently to first one ever to receive first ever Pacific Islander to receive an honorary doctor from Messi. It's a nurse by the name Carl Fuimaono. That man, you know the man, and I'm so proud to be able to play a part on that one. So that is how much I value the nurses, and I want to congratulate you all and thank you for the role you play in the society. I had a look at the topic, and when I look at the topic, the first thing I did, I needed to know, to make sure I understand the topic. So this topic, we have a lot of assumption. We assume that better health for Pacificans, we assume that current health outcomes need improving. That is probably given. And we also assume, when we say that pathway to better health, we assume that good education leads to better health. And there's a lot of discussion to be carried out on that one. And when we talk about equity in education, we also assume that currently there is inequity in education. And it also implies that because of inequity, the education among Pacificans is not good. So the assumption, if we need better health for Pacificans, and in order to do that, we need better education. And to get better education, we need equity in the education system. As I endeavor to understand the topic, I found this, many of you probably seen this one, is from a report in the US on equity done by a specific group. I forgot to mention, but I think it's very easy to find them in the internet. We must develop leaders who can transform our institutions by eliminating inequitable practices and cultivate the unique gifts, talents, and interests of every child, so that success and failure are no longer predictable by students' identity, racial cultural, and economic or any other social factor. And this shed the light for me because just looking at those statements, I think we can all feel what it's like to be assessed based on how you look and the color of your skin. And because of the enormity of the topic, I think this is a topic that should be covered by three different talks. And because of the limitation of my time, I would like to just speak on three things only. I need to touch briefly on the education system with regard to Pacific learners, and speak on Pacific potentials and the system offerings, and share a bit about my personal experience in my own journey relative to the About To. So you've probably seen a lot, many times, this little picture. The education system, it's based on equality, not equity. But you see, when you use equality, when you base the offerings on equality, you assume that benefit will be equally obtained by the people you provide the service for. But that is also assuming that we start from the same point. But the reality is society is varied, and we don't start from the same point. And that's where equality on the left is not very helpful for our people. Where if the service is provided on equity basis, then the picture on the right where everyone benefits regardless of where you started from. So when you look at illustrations like that, then you know the a system that is based on equality is not very helpful for us. This is obtained from about more than 60,000 students at AUT. My friend Walter from AUT kindly offered to share this graph. And you see on your right, on the axis, on the vertical axis is secondary school decile, and the deprivation index on your x-axis. And you can see that we start from a very low point. Number one, our deprivation index is high, and most of us come from a very low decile school. And that is a starting point that is disadvantaged in any measure relative to all the other groups. So you see, you've probably seen this picture a lot. Einstein said that everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And we need to think about the education system in the light of this picture, because if the education system here is assessed by your ability to climb the tall coconut tree, and the poor elephant and the seal will find it very difficult. And that if that is the only system we use to measure people, then you can see the unfairness of the system. See, the potential within the Pacificans and the available offerings. I think the best thing that we need to do now is to actually take advantage of the offering that are currently available. Uh, and see, everyone is a genius in something. And I found that quite a lot of problems that we face here is we don't really spend much time figuring out what are you good at. I have a son who is about 27 now. When he finished from high school, I knew that he did not really know what he wanted to do. And I advised him to muck around. When he was young, he asked me, Dad, what is the study I need to do for lots of money? And I said to him, not science, because I was doing science. If science was results in a lot of money, then we would be having a lot of money now. Anyway, he decided to go to university simply because his mates went to Otago, and he went to Otago, did a BSc, but towards the end of his study, he discovered marketing. So he did a number of papers adding on to his BSc degree and did marketing, and he discovered that that's what he's passionate about. And when he came out then straight into a job, and that job has got some marketing function for him, and he excels, and he did very well. But I think it's a notion for all of us. If we are parents, we need to help our children find what are their passion, and quite often this is a major problem with our people. Um, Many people go to university because they want to be academic or being pushed to go to university. But in doing so, we ignore the professional pursuits like nurses and plumbing and building and all these professionals that probably earn a lot more than being a lecturer at university. But I think the starting point is to discover what's our passion. And Pacific people are so talented. We have a lot to offer wherever we go, and I think that is the starting point. We need to talk to our children and give them this much opportunity to explore their talent. Give them hammer when they were young to see if they like building or. But I think this is an area that is not very uh, strong in the way we raise our children in diaspora. I remember when I was growing up in the islands, went to high school, there were many more kids doing science than doing art. The arts were for people who could speak English and who could read. And the rest of us who were very lazy and don't really want to read and didn't speak English very well, we would do science because science involves a lot more drawing and pictures and relate to what we do at home, because at home you slaughter a pig and go fishing and do gardening, and all of those are science stuff. It was very easy for you to understand when you go to school. And for me, especially, that became my passion to pursue science because I couldn't speak English very well or read well. And there are different things here that clash, that disadvantage our people. I think the first strategy for Pacific tertiary education was written 2001, and before then there was no education strategy for Pacific. And I think there were a lot of promotional campaigns to get our children educated. And the government initiative was taken up by the community to simply means that you need to go to university. You need to get a law degree. And so many people end up doing law or doctorate, going to do being a doctor. And I end up having a lot of students who come to university, and you ask, for example, I ask a girl, what are you doing? I'm doing a BA in education. do you like it? And she said, well, mom told me to do a BA in education because the mother was a teacher. She knows any better. She doesn't know any better, but got the daughter to do a degree in education as well. And so there is a domestic influence. Some of I come across a lot of students who pursue the passion of their dad and their mom, and that is not very good for students. And we have a lot of unexplored potential because of the limited market. For example, I think there are so many Pacific people, parents who wouldn't want their children to do a degree in art, because what job do you get if you get a degree in art? And if you like dancing, that's your passion. But you see, because of the limited market in New Zealand, there's not much job for people who dance. But if we think of dance as a product for the world, then we should think about, if you send your student, your child to do a degree in dancing, and explore the opportunity of going overseas and study in a different college, we just see the people, the opportunity of rugby players, for example, who come to New Zealand and play, and then they find far better market going overseas. And there are a lot of unexplored potential with our people, and water is something that we can think about. So education strategy for specific people, and I think if there is a strategy for a people, then it should be based on exploitation of their passions. Because I think the Pacific people would love to work with their hands. They are very good with their hands. And I use this example. If we have a strategy that after 10 years from now, the Pacific people will dominate the building industry, what would that be like? And I think it's something that we need to think strategically about. After 10 years from now, then the nurses is dominated by Pacific people. Because I tell you, there aren't that group of the Pacific people are the best at nursing, because they don't do it just with their head. They do the nursing with their heart and approaching the patients, with an understanding of how they feel. And we are the best people to do that. When I go to university, I wanted to find out how the Pacific staff work, because I was spending all my working life at Fonterra. I worked in Fonterra as a scientist, and going to Massey, the first time for me to work with Pacific staff, and I try to explore how they feel. And quite interesting, many of them feel like canaries in the coal mine. The canaries were used by the miners to detect the toxic gases in the mine, because quite often we don't really smell it, but the canary will die fast because they are very sensitive to lack of oxygen. And if the canary dies, then they get out, and many of the Pacific staff think that they are like that. They feel like canaries, because when the economic environment of the university fails, then they are the first people to lose their jobs. And it's quite a sad one. And there was a lot of publications last year and this year about the lack of Pacific in high positions in education institutes. There was lack of professors, and I found out by talking to an associate professor in Auckland University that I'm the only one who had professor with a science background in New Zealand for Pacific. And I thought, that's very interesting. I didn't know that, and I'm not quite sure if that is important either. But you see, if we feel like it's quite a long journey. to change the system, it's a it's a quite a long process. And of course, we have to work on that. We have to get the people aware of what is going on. In my short time at Messi, I was working with a lot of people, especially in the higher management, to understand how Pacific feels. You know, when you say this is how a Pacific person would interpret that. And we need to focus on the progress and choose the right fight. In my own journey, I probably talk about later, because I was not a brilliant student. There were lots of things that could be interpreted as racism coming my way, but I chose to focus on progressing my own journey. So success should be defined by our determination today, not by the negative things of the past. And that's the standing that I take. So my personal experience, as I said, I started last year, and my role is to help the Pacific students lift their academic performance. We fail a lot. And my boss told me that my first KPI is to gain credibility among the Messi staff. And I said to her, what on earth does that mean? And she said, you need to gain respect from the Messi staff. And I said, how many staff at Messi? It's actually 3,000, nearly 4,000 people. And I thought, how on earth we get get the respect of these people? So I asked my PA to organize a meeting where me going and talk to the college boards. Messi's got 5 boards, and my PA organized me to go and speak in their college board. And I said before, and when you talk to the staff in Messi, you can see the colonial influence and racism and stereotyping is something that exists. And so I visited the college board and share my personal journey, share introduce my team, and I basically told them about my own journey. And this is me when I was young. I put that photo up to show off my hairstyle in the early 80s and mid 80s. And when I show up to Messi, I was told to go away because I was too dumb to do university study. And I did not have a mental capacity to do university education. So, I didn't really blame them because they went by the results of my tests and exams. Everybody had good grades, and then there was me. And, and there are many cases. Like at the end of my study, I was asked by my professor can you please write a paper about your academic journey? What made the transition in your journey to change from failing below average students to become the top honor student in our department and the recipient of a top PhD scholarship? And I said to her, why do I need to write a paper like that? And she said, it would be a good teaching tool for us, because every year we have people like you coming here, don't really know what we are about, don't really and we encourage you many times to go away. Our only solution for people like you was to encourage them to go away. And we did that to you, but you didn't. You were dumb enough to stay, and now you prove us wrong. And we want to know how many students like you whom we have already sent away, but maybe we didn't know how to teach them. So that was a good send off for me. But you see, when I shared with this board, I told them my story, and I said, see, this is my team, and this is what we try to do. We work on the principles of apple seeds. And the apple seed principles, you don't ask how many seeds are there in the apple, but you ask how many apples are there in the seeds. And to actually answer that question, it depends on what you do. If I take the seed and throw it to the rubbish, I won't get an apple from that one. Whereas if I take the seed and plant it in the right environment, fertilize it, water it, I will get thousands and thousands of apples from one seed. And my message to these institutes and the boards You see, underneath that I'm looking, there is potential, and I only ask you to nurture them, because through the doors of your board, of your colleges, will come people who look like me. They look dumb. They look as if they are not there. They don't belong there. And the last thing you want to do is to tell them to go away, because I promise you, underneath this dumb looking, there is potential to be great. And I'm asking you to nurture them. And that went very well. And now there's a lot of work within the university to get that right. And I also talk a lot to the students. And number one, there is the power in being different. Don't worry about the fact that you look different. And you need to see what everyone else sees, but think what no one else thinks. And that is a principle that I took with me into my work. As a scientist, I was very successful, invented a number of technologies that bring millions of dollars to the New Zealand economy. And this is the coconut whom was told by the university to go away. And there's nothing wrong with the way I look. There's nothing wrong with being different, but you need to think differently as well. Thinking differently is a good thing, and don't worry and try to be like everybody else. It's just you just be unique. That's your gift that given to every one of us. And the other one is, I also told the student it's very important to use the right yardstick to measure our performance. So we need to aspire to things bigger than ourselves. I found working with the Pacific people, students, the Samoans are comparing themselves to the Tongans, and the Tongans compare themselves to the Fijians. And why do you compare yourself to each other? That person got B, you got B plus, and you feel good about yourself. If you compare yourself to the Chinese, then you aspire to A plus. What's wrong with the A plus? And then, Messi, we have a strategy written by people who were before me, and they call them the pearls of wisdom, growing the pearls of wisdom. And I spoke to them about making of a pearl. The oyster is open, and one of those little stones falls into the flesh. And because of the pain of the rough edges of the stone, the oyster will cover with all sorts of minerals, and over time, it's not painful anymore, and it sits there, and the stone sits there, smooth surface, as part of the oyster flesh, and you make beautiful pearls. So the ingredients for rough edges is ingredients for making a good pearl: rough edges, suffering and pain, and time. And I said to the Pacific students, university education is not easy. It's a hard road to go to walk on, and you need to be prepared to deal with rough edges, prepared to suffer the pain, and prepared to give the time. If you are not prepared to do that, don't complain. And so, the final remarks: the education system operates on equality model. Disadvantage us as Pacific people. For better education, we need the equity operating model. So changing the system is a long journey. We should take advantage of what is available now. There are diversity of offerings now, and our people are not taking up. Nurses, plumbing, building, all other science stuff, professional gifting that we need to take. And Pacific has potential. Can an institute provide an environment to allow? This is part of our journey. We're working with the institute to know how Pacificans study, how do they work. They study with their heart and not so much with their brains. The Pacific student need to harden up, do what they are required to do. Education is not easy, right? If we get better at education, then hope for better health. Malo Albito. And that is me.